Is at the top of the stretch in the Wood Memorial. Here's Wayburn. Here's Dynamic One on the outside. Brooklyn Strong is down at the rail, and Crowded Trade is coming on now as they come for the 8th pole. It is Dynamic One. Here's Crowded Trade on the outside. Wayburn continues to battle down at the rail, and it's a 16th to the finish. And here's Bourbonic, who was last, making a late run out in the middle of the track. It is Dynamic One and Bourbonic. Dynamic One and Bourbonic, a photo finish.
Welcome back to another Kentucky Derby profile here on the Racing Rundown. I'm Eric DeCoster. In this edition, we will be looking at Dynamic one of the 4 representatives from the Todd Pletcher barn. Dynamic One, 1 for 5 in his career, a maiden win to his credit, 2 seconds as well. And they were good seconds. One was behind Greatest Honor in a maiden race in December, and last time out, of course, the big one, when he was the runner-up in the Wood, beaten just ahead up at Aqueduct at 15-1 that day. Really just got nailed on the line by his stablemate Bourbonic. But Dynamic One, an interesting horse. I'll put it that way. That win was really nice at Aqueduct, going 1 mile and an eighth, so the distance isn't a problem. And you finished off just fine, won by 5 1/4 lengths, but you only beat 4 other horses. And the time was slow, as in 1:55.1 for 9 furlongs. And I know Aqueduct, the track doesn't play too great, but that's just not good. You can't deny it. I mean, there are horses that have gone a full 10 seconds quicker than that at that distance at other tracks. And in the Wood Memorial, that was really impressive in my opinion, given he kind of had, he's closed in other races coming from off the pace, where he was second behind Greatest Honor. He came from off the pace. Another good maiden start in January off the pace. But this was against graded stakes caliber horses, graded stakes winners, closed from off the pace, made a really strong move, actually led for the majority of the stretch, and then got pipped off at the end. But also, that time did not come back too much better. 1:54.2 for the 9 furlongs, still very, very slow. Once again, that's how Aqueduct plays, but that's just not good. So that's the last 2 races have by far been the best races of his career, but that doesn't really say much. The 3 before that were maiden starts. Took him a while to really figure his stuff out. Needed more distance, it seemed. And I think that's probably the biggest thing with Dynamic One. He is going to like the distance of the Derby. His 2 best races have been at 1 mile and an eighth, pedigree-wise, 1 1/4 mile, 1.5 miles, right up his alley. And he galloped out really strongly after that Wood Memorial victory. So he wants more distance. But then it's the class and the ability and the talent. What does he really have? He hasn't really shown much. I'm not a huge speed figure person. You'll hear that in other, individual profiles, and just in general, listening to our podcast and in some of our other individual race previews. They're not my end all be all. But when you see something that's really, really bad or really, really good, or certain trends and stuff, then you got to pay attention. And Dynamic One has some of the worst numbers in this year's Derby. I mean, his lone career win, by the standards I'm using, the second worst performance of his career. That means that 3 losses were better than his 1 win. And even that second in the Wood Memorial was not his best career race. The best career race was actually that second in that maiden race to Greatest Honor back in December. So from certain standpoints, those 2 races, while visually the best, certainly weren't actually the best by a metric standard. And that's not a good thing. And just in general, the Wood Memorial has not been a productive Derby prep. We've seen a lot of long shots hit the board in that race, even win the race, and then come back and flop in Louisville a month later. So it just compiles on. It's really hard to find the silver lining with this horse that, okay, he can run a really good race in the Derby. I said distance already, maybe the setup. He's going to be coming from off the pace. Derby pace should be on the quicker side. Maybe not, it's not going to break any records, but it'll be beneficial to horses coming from mid-pack, further back in my opinion. And because of that, Dynamic One certainly does set up very nicely for that. But we know Todd Pletcher. Todd Pletcher will run anything he can get in the Kentucky Derby, and he's a great trainer. But the horses that he runs in the Derby always run true to form. You think about Always Dreaming. He was coming off such a strong prep season. Super Saver, while he wasn't, winning those prep races, he was running huge races, and he liked Churchill Downs. But the horses that he runs in the Derby that do not have strong form coming in, or you can't really find something that really sets him apart in that year's Derby, those are the ones that don't really run well. He's never had a horse, he has, but it's hard to name a horse that's run ultra well in the Derby that you weren't expecting going into. They always run true to form, and Dynamic One's form just really is not that strong heading into this Kentucky Derby. So who knows? He could run a career best race because of the distance, because of the race setup. But that's something that we're just going to have, in my opinion, we're just going to have to wait and see. because speed figures, times, visually, who he's been racing against, who he's been getting beat by, it's just not all that great. So dynamic one for me at least. Once again, we're not here to dole out who's winning and who's losing the Derby with these profiles. It's more information in what we're reading. But giving my opinion, I don't really think he's going to be too much of a factor in this year's Derby. And if he is, it's going to be a surprise in my opinion, and I think a lot of other people's opinions as well. So I listed off tons of negatives. Don't want to run through those again, but the positives, once again, just to clarify, the pedigree and the race setup are going to be, if anything, the things that help him improve in this year's Kentucky Derby. So that's all I have for you guys on this Kentucky Derby profile. And of course, we'll see you next time here on the Racing Rundown for more excellent Derby coverage.